Okay, so picture this. It's 1859. We're on this remote little island, kind of wedged between what is now the United States and Canada. And on this tiny speck of land, two of the world's biggest superpowers are staring each other down, about to go to war. It's an absolutely wild story. On one side, you have the British Empire, and they are not messing around. They're gathering their forces. We're talking more than 2,000 men getting ready for a fight. And it wasn't just troops. The Royal Navy, the most powerful navy in the world, shows up with 5 massive warships. Their cannons, all 70 of them, are aimed and ready. But the Americans, they aren't backing down an inch. You've got 461 U.S. soldiers digging trenches, building fortifications, and bracing for what's coming. A real powder keg. So you have this huge international incident brewing. Thousands of soldiers, warships ready to fire, and the whole thing was kicked off by the shooting of a single farm animal. Yeah, you heard me right, a pig. So this is the big question, right? How on earth does a dead pig escalate into a full-blown military standoff between the United States and Great Britain? Well, the answer is just fascinating. You see, the story doesn't really start with the pig. To understand what happened, we have to go back 13 years earlier, to a treaty, and a line on a map that was, let's just say, dangerously vague. Okay, so here's the problem. The Oregon Treaty of 1846 said the border runs through the middle of the channel. Sounds simple enough, doesn't it? Well, the issue was there was more than one channel, and nobody agreed on which one was the right one. And right here, this is where all the trouble begins. The Americans said the border should go through the Haro Strait, which is the one to the west, but the British were convinced it was the Rosario Strait to the east, and sitting right there in the middle, the super valuable San Juan Islands. And, you can kind of see why both sides were so dug in. The U.S. argued, look, the Haro Strait is wider, it's more direct, it's the obvious choice. But the UK fired back, pointing to older maps and saying, nope, the Rosario Strait is the only one that actually follows the treaty's language. Both nations were absolutely certain they were in the right. So, with the diplomats totally deadlocked, the whole situation basically fell into the laps of the few settlers who were actually living on these disputed islands. And that, my friends, brings us to the little spark that lit the whole fuse. Right, let's meet our cast of characters. First, you've got Lyman Cutler. He's an American farmer just trying to grow some potatoes. Then there's Charles Griffin, who works for the very British Hudson's Bay Company. And of course, the victim, Griffin's pig, who, it turns out, really, really liked Cutler's potatoes. So on June 15th, 1859, Cutler found the pig in his garden yet again, and this time he shot it. He went to Griffin, offered to pay $10 for it, but Griffin demanded $100. The argument that followed was just a perfect little summary of the whole international mess. Cutler's position was, your pig was on my American land, and Griffin's was basically, my British pig has every right to be here. And this is the moment where a tiny neighborhood dispute just spirals completely out of control. It's pretty incredible to see how fast it all escalated. I mean, look at how fast this happened. In just a little over 6 weeks, we go from one gunshot in a potato patch to a full-on military crisis. As soon as the British threatened to arrest Cutler, the American settlers panicked and called for army protection. And from there, it just exploded. So it really looked like shots were about to be fired. But then, thankfully, some common sense showed up. The British governor ordered his commander on the scene to land troops and start the invasion. But the commander, Rear Admiral Baines, took one look at the situation and refused. He basically said there was no way he was going to start a war over something so ridiculous. He was the one adult in the room. So, with war narrowly avoided, the whole crisis enters this new and honestly kind of bizarre phase. The two armies that were moments away from killing each other now had to figure out how to live together on a tiny island. Wiser heads prevailed back in Washington and London. They sent in negotiators who came up with a pretty clever solution, a joint military occupation. Both sides agreed to keep a small force of no more than 100 men on the island and just wait for the politicians to finally sort things out. And what did they do while they waited for the next 12 years? They basically had a picnic. Seriously, the British and American soldiers became great friends. They'd visit each other's camps for dinner, they celebrated holidays like the 4th of July together, they even held sports competitions. Apparently, the biggest risk to peace on the island during that time was just too much booze. So for more than a decade, you have this peaceful but still unresolved situation. But finally, after the American Civil War was over, both nations decided it was time to put this thing to bed for good. In the end, they chose diplomacy instead of war. They signed the Treaty of Washington, which handed the whole dispute over to an international arbitrator to make the final call. And who do you get to be the neutral judge between the US and Britain? Why? The German Emperor Wilhelm I, of course. On October 21st, 1872, the Emperor's Commission made its decision. They sided with the United States. The official border would follow the Harrow Strait. And just like that, after a 13-year standoff that all started with a pig, the San Juan Islands officially became part of America. And this really shows you the legacy of the whole thing. On the left, you can see what the British camp looked like during that long, peaceful occupation. And on the right, that same spot today, a beautiful, quiet national park. It's a pretty powerful reminder of a war that, thank goodness, never actually happened. You know, the pig war is such a quirky, almost funny story, but it does leave you with a pretty serious thought. It's a perfect example of how a tiny, almost silly disagreement can blow up into a major international crisis when national pride and fuzzy borders are involved. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?